Why did you restrict evidences to only empiricism, the 5 senses?
Because
Why
that's how
did
we
you?
perceive the world, isn't it?
That's incorrect. No, we have a lot of other ways of reaching conclusions, which is not empirical. Where do you love to go?
Sudan.
How do you know Sudan exists? There is no empiricism. Where are you going to go if there is no Sudan? I'm asking a question.
I guess there's such a massive consensus evidence that Sudan does exist.
So testimony. When there is a large number of testimony, that's a valid source of information. When you take the bus, do you have empirical evidence that the bus driver is a qualified bus driver? This is a life and death matter. It could crash you. Do you have empirical evidence that he's a qualified bus driver?
I guess not completely.
When it comes to God, you don't apply consistency. When it comes to testimony, that's the point I'm trying to make. Testimony is a valid source of knowledge. It's not only empirical senses. Reasoning, deduction, mathematics, all of these things we use as valid sources of knowledge other than the empirical senses.
Okay, guys, so the problem with this reasoning is twofold. First of all, because I am Greek, I understand what empirical evidence means, because empirical comes from a Greek word, empiria, which means experience. But unfortunately, the philosophy books misuse this word. So that is the confusion. So empirical, okay, I just said that, comes from a word, Greek word that means empiria. In other words, experience. So we have two kinds of evidence. Logical evidence that comes from our mind, which are philosophical evidence or evidence like logical absolutes, mathematics. Mathematics are logical evidence. Okay, and then we have the empirical evidence, which means everything that we get from the outside world, from reality. But unfortunately, I need to change the wording because as I just saw, in philosophical books, in formal philosophical books in the English language, what I am describing now is they call it priori evidence and posteriori evidence. Priori evidence, they infer to the logical evidence, and posteriori evidence, they infer to the empirical evidence. So let me use these definitions. Although my definition is accurate, because I know what the Greek means. So that's why I was confused for so long. Because for me, in a Greek ear, that is very straightforward. But the books in English, they confuse this stuff. Not they confuse, sorry, I used the wrong word. They use the wrong word to describe something. Anyway.
Empirical evidence, observational, experimental. Based on direct observation, measurement, or experiment. Example, scientific studies, statistical data, lab results. 2. Logical evidence, rational, deductive, analytical. Based on reasoning, logic, and deductive or inductive arguments. Example, mathematical proofs, syllogisms, formal logic. 3. Testimonial evidence, based on personal accounts, expert opinions, or witness testimony. Example, a witness testifying in court or an expert's opinion in a scientific debate. 4. Anecdotal evidence, based on personal experiences or isolated cases rather than systematic research. Example, my friend recovered from this disease after using this herb. 5. Circumstantial evidence, indirect evidence that implies something happened but does not directly prove it. Example, fingerprints at a crime scene suggest someone was there but do not directly show them committing the crime. 6. Documentary evidence, written or recorded materials used to support a claim. Example, contracts, historical records, official documents. 7. Statistical evidence data collected and analysed to support a claim. Example, 90% of users reported satisfaction with this product. 8. Philosophical or introspective evidence. Based on self-reflection, thought experiments, or abstract reasoning. Example, Descartes' I think therefore I am. 9. Scientific theoretical evidence. Indirect evidence supporting theories through predictions and models. Example, the existence of black holes was predicted before direct observation based on Einstein's theory.
Okay, all this kind of evidence you just saw are subcategories of evidence that we can put in two main categories. The one main category, in the English language they call it a priori evidence, which I call it logical evidence. And the other category, in English they call it a posteriori evidence, that I call it empirical evidence. You see where is the problem? It's not really a problem. So let me use now the English language terms in order to not be confused. So we have two main categories. A priori evidence that infers to everything before we engage with the world, inside our head, in our logic. And then there is the next category, which is a posteriori evidence that includes our interaction, our experience with the outside world. Okay, so now that we made this distinction, we can respond to this gentleman's claims.
Why did you restrict evidences to only empiricism, the five senses?
Because
why
that's how
did
we
you
perceive the world, isn't it?
That's incorrect, no.
Why my mother put this on my chair? Mothers, we all love them, but they do these unnecessary things. Why? We don't know. Okay, so there are two kinds of evidence. The evidence that we have inside our head and the evidence of the outside world. Okay, some atheists overstate the truth-bearing ability of science, and they falsely claim that the only valuable evidence is the things we can rigorously, methodologically investigate. In other words, scientific evidence. Or things we can prove in the lab. There are many kinds of evidence, as you say, like logical evidence, that go beyond this. But the problem is not that atheists overstate the truth-bearing ability of science, is that you, Muslims, understate the truth-bearing ability of science and overstate the truth-bearing ability of dogma. That is what's happening, as you will see later on in this discussion.
We have a lot of other ways of reaching conclusions which is not empirical. Where do you love to go?
Sudan.
How do you know Sudan exists? There is no empiricism.
Knowing, excuse me, I shouted in the microphone. Knowing that Sudan exists is empiricism. But I don't blame you, because obviously you don't understand the Greek to understand that empiricism means experience. Okay, so that confuses you, but it's irrelevant. Okay, it doesn't matter.
Where are you going to go if there is no Sudan? I'm asking a question.
I guess there's such a massive consensus evidence that Sudan does exist.
So testimony, when there is a large number of testimony, that's a valid source of information. When you take the bus, do you have empirical evidence that the bus driver is a qualified bus driver? This is a life and death matter. It could crash you. Do you have empirical evidence that he's a qualified bus driver?
I guess not completely.
When it comes to God, you don't apply consistency. When it comes to testimony, that's the point I'm trying to make. Testimony is a valid source of knowledge. It's not only empirical senses. Reasoning, deduction, mathematics, all of these things we use as valid sources of knowledge other than the empirical senses.
Okay, and now my ancient Greek type of philodoxia love for glory, ego comes in place. This arrogance, but it's the only way I can think if I'm arrogant. So the passions drive my thought. The passion. So I, Socrates Son, that yesterday defeated the Quran's inimitability challenge, and I brought Allah to my feet like Hercules challenge era. I, who a week ago defeated the Euthyro dilemma, who philosophers were struggling up with this dilemma for 2,300 years. Now I will give you the most important exegesis in epistemology that explains your problem, that I invented. Thank you. So I needed to make this statement first. So obviously I'm just kidding or not. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. So obviously we need to be modest in knowledge, and I am modest. Okay, so I make these statements. That doesn't mean the person who is not modest and be able to learn cannot advance in logic by definition. So okay, so my exegesis is simple yet very logical and very powerful. Level of reasonable to believe equals level of claim plus level of conviction this claim demands divided by the evidence. With the word reasonable to believe, I am referring to effective reasoning. Why is this important? Because our human state is cursing us, in a sense, to only engage in effective reasoning, not in absolute reasoning. Because we are not gods and we don't have the full extent, we don't have a fully conscious state that we can investigate absolute things. Our mind is not eternal. We are bounded to only investigate effective reasoning. So we are doing the best we can with what we've got, with the human condition in this world, which is fallible. It's not absolute. It's not like we don't know anything. So the first term in my exegesis, reasonable to believe, reflects exactly that, effective reasoning. So reasonable to believe equals the level of claim. What is that? Okay, imagine I tell you that in my basement I have a car. Imagine now we are talking on Discord, and I tell you, hey, John, in my basement I have a car. I bought it yesterday. Look the picture, and I sent you from Discord my picture of a car in my basement. You say, very nice, bravo. Very nice car. How much did you buy it? You will tell me. Okay. What now if I told you, hey John, in my basement I have a dragon. I just, found it yesterday. Here is its picture, and I sent you a picture from Discord of a dragon. Will you believe me then? You will be insane to believe me. So when I sent you a picture of a dragon and you believe that I have in my basement a dragon, you are a complete idiot. So what is the difference of those two claims? It's the level of claim. Having a car is not a significant claim. Having a dragon is very significant. So now the evidence I need to provide to convince you that I have a dragon, it's not just one photograph. I need to bring you here to see the dragon. So the evidence I need to provide to meet this claim is very significant. Okay, so that is the level of claim. Plus the level of conviction this claim demands. What that means? Imagine I knock your door. You open the door and I say, Mary, now it's a woman. Okay. Mary, yes, Kostas, which is my real name. Yes, Kostas, how can I do you good? I don't know. Do you have a glass of water? Can I have a glass of water, please? I'm really thirsty. Mary will say, okay, my dear sir, here's a glass of water. And I drink. I really enjoy how I make everything, animatic. Anyway. And I drink. What if I told Mary, can I take your child with me to go out in the night in this nightclub? What? She will see an old guy who looks like a pervert. She doesn't know me. And I'm asking to take out her daughter to a nightclub. What she will tell me? Yes, here, please. Okay. So that is the level of conviction I demand. In the first case, when I asked for a glass of water, the level of conviction I demanded from her was very low. When I asked to take out her daughter in a nightclub, now the level of conviction I demand from her is very high. So it's not reasonable for her to accept what I'm saying, to give me her daughter to take her out in a nightclub. Okay, that is, now we have the level of claim plus the level of conviction this claim demands divided by the evidence, which are logical and empirical, I will say, or change these words. How you call it in English? Let me see. I forgot now. 1 second, please. Priori evidence and posterior evidence. But, okay, so not all evidence have the same significance. So, scientific evidence, exactly because it's a rigorous methodological investigation, have more weight than circumstantial evidence, for example. So not all evidence have the same weight. Okay. Now, okay, so the problem you are doing, my dear friend, is, okay, you established that we have more evidence, not just empirical evidence, which is true, but you don't take into account the level of claim you are making, the level of conviction your claim demands, and the weight of individual evidences. Okay? You are not taking all this into account. So, in other words, when you want to prove that God exists, it's not the same claim as Sudan exists. It's much more significant. Okay, you see where's the problem? Just because there are many evidences, many types of evidences, that doesn't mean all these types of evidences have the same epistemological weight, and that doesn't mean all claims have the same epistemological demand. Okay, my dear friend? Okay, so That was a complete lesson in epistemology by Socrates Son. Thank you very much.